She didn't have superpowers. She didn't hang diplomas on the wall nor wear noble titles on her name tag. But there was something about Olivia Harris that couldn't be explained. It could only be felt. It was the way she walked into places, as if she already knew she would find pain, and still smiled. Her job was to care for forgotten elderly people in an ordinary nursing home in any town. But what she did went far beyond what could be taught. Olivia listened to what no one said, and that in itself was transformative. On the first day, she was greeted with hard stares and fake smiles. They didn't expect her to stay. They didn't expect her to care. But Olivia didn't come for status, salary, or recognition. She came because she believes that even the quietest souls still deserve to be touched. Even when the world has already given up on them. Even when no one else has the patience to wait. She didn't want to be noticed. She just wanted to be present. That's when she saw him, always in the corner, always silent. A man who seemed made of stone, with the eyes of someone who had seen the world crumble and never wanted to rebuild it. No one approached him. No one spoke about him. They only said, "He's always been like this." But Olivia didn't believe in unreachable people. And that, just that, was the beginning of something. What no one expected was that her kindness would cause discomfort, that the silent faith of a nurse would provoke mockery, humiliation, and closed doors. That loving without interest could be seen as a threat. But Olivia stayed, even when it hurt, even when they made her feel unwelcome. Because deep down, she felt there was something there that needed her, even if no one said it aloud. And so, between forced laughter and heavy silences, everything began. Not with grand gestures, but with small persistences. A flower left discreetly. An act of care without applause. An invitation rejected that would change everything. Because sometimes what transforms a life is someone who decides to listen to what even time tried to forget.
Before diving into this exciting story, we want to make sure you don't miss out on any of our incredible content. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, now is the perfect time to do so. By subscribing, you'll become a valued member of our growing community, where we share amazing stories, insightful lessons, and much more. Don't wait any longer. Hit that subscribe button now and join us on this amazing journey.
The automatic door opened with a soft hiss, revealing a hallway with beige walls and the scent of disinfectant. Olivia Harris tightened the strap of her bag on her shoulder and took a deep breath before taking her first step. Her comfortable shoes clicked steadily on the waxed floor, but her heart moved with caution. On the other side of the reception, a staff member, masking her impatience, pointed to the east wing without lifting her eyes from the monitor. "New nurses start over. There. Good luck." It wasn't sarcasm, but it wasn't exactly welcoming either. It was as if they already expected her not to last. As soon as she entered the patient wing, Olivia was met by a silence that didn't fit the name of the place. Serenity Meadows. Peaceful meadows? Here, there were only the dragging echoes of walkers, sparse groans, and a television softly whispering old news at low volume. At the end of the hallway, an elderly woman struggled to reach a glass of water on the tray, and Olivia rushed to help. "Thank you, dear," the old woman said, offering a short smile and eyes that seemed unsure if they could trust her. It was like this all the time, looks caught between distrust and neediness. In the locker room, she met two co-workers. One, a blonde, didn't even glance up from her phone. The other, in a pink lab coat, gave her a cold smile. "You'll see. Here it's every person for themselves. Just one thing, don't get attached." Olivia nodded without responding. She tucked her small Bible into the pocket of her coat, not as a weapon, but as a shield, and left. Outside in the cafeteria, the first residents were gathered at round tables playing dominoes, eating Jell-O, or just staring into the emptiness. One of them, sitting in the corner of the room, looked like a statue. Walter Green. Walter didn't raise his eyes. He didn't even twitch an eyebrow. He just watched, He wore a gray sweater and wrinkled linen pants. His thinning hair, combed with effort, betrayed someone who had once cared about his appearance but now just existed. As Olivia walked by, she gently said, "Good afternoon, Mr. Walter." He responded with silence, neither anger nor kindness. Just absence, the kind of absence that weighs more than an insult. And she felt it. There was a story there, one that wasn't ready to be told. At the end of the day, Olivia passed by the staff room and heard muffled laughter. "The saint is trying to talk to Walter. Good luck, Mother Teresa." The mockery was low but sharp. Olivia pretended not to hear. She stared at her reflection in the dark window of the break room and whispered, "Faith, Olivia, you came to serve." The phrase was for herself, like planting courage in dry soil. She knew that this place needed more love than skill. But love was not always welcome where pain had already made its home. As she finished her shift, Olivia crossed the hall and saw Walter being pushed by a caregiver into his room. The elderly man didn't protest. He only stared at the floor, as if something there was holding him. Olivia felt a shiver, not of fear, but of purpose. It was as if something inside her told her that this man carried secrets too heavy to bear alone. But she didn't yet know that in this nursing home of faded corridors, it wasn't the silence that hid the wounds. It was the music that had been silenced. And that first night, Olivia slept poorly. Not because of fear of the new, but because of the feeling that she had entered a house full of echoes. And some echoes cry from within. On the second day, the sun had yet to conquer the morning fog when Olivia crossed the gates of Serenity Meadows. She carried with her a worn fabric bag and the same serene expression from the day before. But now, there was something more in her steps, the firmness of someone who refuses to be shaped by rejection. In the cafeteria, she greeted everyone with a sweet voice, but most responded with silence, or with eyes that said, "Don't bother trying." Even the black coffee seemed too bitter in that place. In the patient wing, Olivia offered to help a resident put on his slippers. He lightly pushed her away with his cane. "I don't need help from someone like you." The blow wasn't physical, it was to the heart. But she only smiled with her eyes, respected the space, and stepped away without a hint of anger. Later, while changing the sheets of a lady who said she missed her daughter, she heard from behind, "You're doing it wrong." It was another nurse. "This isn't a Sunday afternoon movie, rookie. You can't save everyone." Olivia simply replied, "But you can care with dignity." That afternoon, the monthly gathering was announced enthusiastically through the loudspeakers in the hallway. "Today at 4 p.m., we'll have music and sweets in the main room. Join us." The decorations were simple, with deflated balloons and colorful streamers taped to the walls. Some of the residents were excited, dressed neatly, fixing their hair as if they were still waiting for someone. Olivia served cups of tea, adjusted cushions on wheelchairs, and smiled even though she wasn't noticed. But Walter disappeared. At 3:55 p.m., he was nowhere to be found. Olivia, curious, knocked on his room door. Silence. She persisted. No sound. No response. When she asked the supervisor, she got the answer. He always does this. He hates noise. He hates people. That hammered in her mind. Hating people isn't natural. It's learned. And she knew there was something more there. Something locked away. Not even age had erased. A kind of pain that preferred silence to sharing. Later, while helping a lady with Alzheimer's find her way in the cafeteria, Olivia overheard whispers coming from the AIDS group. She thinks this is some divine mission she must. Soft laughs. Someone added, "Turn off that light, it's blinding." That hurt, but it didn't destroy her. Olivia knew that kindness disturbs where apathy has become culture. However, that day she felt small, not because of the rejection, but because of the loneliness of fighting for dignity in a place where pain had already become routine. At the end of the gathering, with the hall nearly empty, Olivia gathered the napkins and wiped a tea stain from the table where Walter usually sat. But he didn't come. And that bothered her more than the jokes or the disdain, because there was something in his absence that seemed to scream from within, and it was there among forgotten crumbs and old songs playing softly in the background that Olivia made a silent promise. She wouldn't give up on touching that heart, even if it never asked for it. Friday arrived with the smell of roasted meat and freshly baked cookies. The Serenity Meadows cafeteria was busier than usual. It was community lunch day with live music, an initiative by the administration to lift the residents' spirits. Some tables had been moved, creating space for a small makeshift dance floor. A portable radio played old hits, the kind that brought smiles of nostalgia, even to those who no longer remembered their own names. As always, Olivia was there. Between trays and affections, she handed out cups of juice while watching an elderly couple slowly get up to dance. Their steps were short, but their glances, those still knew how to love. Olivia smiled tenderly. She walked over to the corner of the hall where Walter Green, as usual, sat alone. Arms crossed, he stared fixedly at a wall as if waiting for it to disappear. There was a crease in his forehead and a silence that screamed. Olivia approached calmly, respecting his space but also feeling that she needed to try. "Mr. Walter, it's a beautiful song, isn't it? Sounds like something you might have played before." He didn't answer. He just blinked slowly. Olivia, nonetheless, continued. "If you'd like, I can dance with you. Only if you want, of course." And then came the arrow. Walter turned his face, smiled ironically, and loudly said, "Dance with you? Do you think I'm desperate? I don't mix with people like you. This isn't charity." The entire room paused for a second. Some laughter followed. Other hands covered faces in embarrassment. Olivia froze. The impact was deeper than any shove. She felt exposed, ridiculed. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't allow the tears to fall. She simply stepped away silently, with her head held high and her soul in pieces. At the back of the room, she overheard a venomous comment from one of the nurses. She should have known he wouldn't go for that. More laughter. But inside Olivia, something ignited. It wasn't anger. It was courage. The courage to look at that man and not see him as a monster, but as someone drowning behind his defenses. In the following minutes, Olivia gathered dirty silverware and plates with steady hands, not looking at anyone. In her heart, the pain throbbed, but there was also a seed of something she didn't yet understand. This wasn't just rejection. It was a warning that Walter carried deep wounds, and as a nurse, she knew. Wounds that get infected are the ones no one dares to touch. When her shift ended, Olivia stopped in front of the mirror in the staff bathroom. She looked at herself, adjusted her bun, and discreetly touched the small crucifix hanging under her lab coat. She whispered, "I won't give up on him." Because something inside her told her that Walter wasn't cruel. He was a survivor. And that maybe he just needed someone who wouldn't leave. But what Olivia didn't know yet was that, to reach Walter's soul, she would have to revisit a past he had buried over 30 years ago, along with his music and his heart. It was midnight when Olivia woke to the sound of distant thunder. The rain gently tapped against the window of her small apartment, but her mind was far away. It always returned to that lunch scene, to Walter's eyes, so full of something she still couldn't name. And that night, alone with her cup of tea, she decided, I need to understand who he was before I accept who he has become. The next morning, Olivia arrived at Serenity Meadows earlier than usual. She wore her white coat like armor and kept in her pocket the courage of someone who had been hurt but didn't run away. During the lulls between her duties and measurements, she began to discreetly ask her colleagues about Walter. The answers ranged from disdain to ignorance. That old man's a rock. He never talks about the past. He came here a few years ago, but no one knows where from. Nothing concrete. Just shadows and broken phrases. Later, Olivia sat beside a resident named Ruth, who spent her afternoons knitting in silence. With the delicacy of someone not wanting to intrude, she asked, "Have you ever spoken with Mr. Walter?" Ruth slowly lifted her eyes. "Once, he told me he lost everything." But he didn't explain what that everything was. The phrase echoed like a dissonant note. Lost everything. It was enough to know there was pain there, but not enough to understand it. Back in the patient wing, Olivia noticed that Walter's medical file was incomplete. No family references, no emergency contact, just an old landline number, disconnected. She approached the head nurse to try to get more information, but received a hard look in return. "Olivia, your job is to care, not to snoop. Respect the boundaries." But it wasn't curiosity that moved Olivia. It was empathy. The certainty that no one shuts themselves off like that without a story behind it. That night, as she passed by room 217, she saw the light turned off. No sound, no crack, just the presence of a silence too thick to be simple. She stood there for a few seconds as if waiting for his past to whisper some sign, but nothing came. And still, something inside her told her she was on the right path. Because what isn't said often screams louder. And it was like this between unanswered questions and closed doors that Olivia understood. Sometimes, loving someone is being willing to wait, even without knowing what you're waiting for. The days began to repeat themselves like silent pages of a forgotten book. At Serenity Meadows, each morning felt like the one before. Medications, meals, naps, small fights over the remote, and the dragged sound of wheelchair wheels on the wooden floor. But for Olivia, nothing there was automatic. Every gesture was a choice, every touch, a chance to reclaim something that still breathed inside, even when the world around her insisted on sleeping with its eyes open. Walter remained, the hardest soul to reach. He didn't answer questions. He didn't respond to smiles. He simply existed, as though that was effort enough. Olivia, however, stayed determined. She handled his medication with gentleness. She adjusted his pillows in silence. Sometimes, even without receiving a thank you, she would whisper, "Good night, Mr. Walter," and leave without expecting a response. Because she knew, true kindness doesn't wait for applause. It just plants. Meanwhile, the mockery never ceased. In the cafeteria, one of the aides commented loudly, "She thinks she's going to save souls. She'll end up sinking with them." Olivia heard it, felt it, but didn't react. She preferred to spend her energy on the lady who couldn't sleep without hearing someone tell her she was beautiful, or with the gentleman who confused the nurses with his daughters and asked for hugs as if apologizing. Olivia's faith was discreet but present, and every small gesture of hers was a prayer without words. In the hallways, some residents began to notice. One of them started calling her the girl who listens with her eyes. Another said her presence made the room less cold. But Walter remained walled off. Even so, Olivia began to sit next to him in the late afternoons. Without saying a word, just presence. Sometimes she would leave a flower on his tray, other times just her silence. And in that silence, she heard more than any word could ever tell. There was one afternoon when he seemed to break. She found him in the courtyard, alone, looking at the cloudy sky. "Rain's coming," he said. That was it. 2 words. But to Olivia, that was a whispered miracle. Because sometimes those who scream the most inside are the ones who speak the least on the outside. She smiled tenderly, replied, "Yes, sir," and sat at a respectful distance, not too close, not far enough for him to think he was alone. But that same night when she got home, Olivia wrote in her prayer journal, "Something in him opened, like a crack, as if the pain was tired of hurting." And it was then that she decided, if there was a key to reach Walter's heart, she would find it, even if it meant losing hers along the way. The call came on a rainy Tuesday when Olivia was drinking coffee alone in the staff break room. The caller ID displayed the name Ben McAllister, her old journalist friend. She answered with her heart racing, as if opening an old letter that had been sealed for too long. "Olivia, I found some things, but are you sure you want to know?" The pause was brief, yet heavy with weight. "I do, Ben. He needs to be seen." Hours later, they sat together in a cafe near the center. Ben carefully opened a brown envelope almost ceremoniously. From it, he pulled out several printed sheets with scanned clippings. Walt Green, pianist and singer, played in the jazz clubs of New Orleans in the 70s. He was known for always performing alongside his wife, Helena. The duo was flawless. Until the accident. Olivia read the words with tear-filled eyes. An old newspaper article recounted the tragedy. A fire, after a performance caused by an electrical fault. Helena died instantly. Walter survived, but he never performed again. He disappeared after that, Ben said. No interviews, no appearances. Vanished from the map. Until now. Olivia didn't respond immediately. She simply ran her fingers over the old black and white photo. In it, Walter smiled. Young, elegant, his eyes shining as he looked at his wife. It was hard to associate that man with the bitter man who now refused to even listen to music. His pain wasn't small. It was a world that had collapsed entirely within one chest. On the way back to the nursing home, Olivia walked more slowly through the hallways. Each step seemed more intentional, heavier. She stopped in front of room 217's door. She knocked once but didn't enter. Not yet. She knew that secrets hurt when they're pulled out. She needed time, and he perhaps needed space. That night she didn't try to talk. She simply placed a white flower on his tray, and beneath the napkin, a note with a handwritten phrase. Sometimes the pain we hide is the song that needs to be heard the most. Walter found the note a few hours later. He didn't say anything, but for the first time he didn't throw the flower away. He placed it in the empty glass of water in the corner of the dresser. A small gesture, but to Olivia, it was enough. It was as if for the first time he allowed someone to see his pain without pulling away, without trying to fix him, just seeing him. And it was that quiet night, when no music played, that Olivia understood. Perhaps she wasn't there to force open doors, but to remain outside, until Walter one day decided to unlock it himself. The news spread through the halls with the shy enthusiasm typical of Serenity Meadows. The monthly dance was confirmed for Saturday night. It was the only occasion when residents could wear special clothes, dance to songs from a time they alone knew by heart, and feel alive in a different way. Olivia heard the announcement while changing the bandage of an elderly man who had fallen. She smiled quietly. Maybe now was the time, not to force anything, but to invite someone who had long stopped going. In the late afternoon, she went to room 217. She knocked gently. Walter opened the door without saying anything. He was wearing a thick sweater, his eyes tired. Olivia held a small golden envelope in her hands. "Mr. Walter, Saturday we'll have our dance. I know you prefer to stay here, but I thought I'd give you an invitation." He stared at the envelope with the same expression as someone looking at a ghost. He didn't take it, he just looked. "Dance," he murmured. "These things are for those who still believe in illusions." She calmly replied, "It's not about illusion, sir. It's just a place where music comes back to breathe." He closed the door slowly without thanking her, without accepting, but also without refusing. Olivia left the envelope leaning against the doorknob. Then she continued her shift as if nothing had happened. But inside, every step carried the weight of doubt. Would he open it? Did he still remember how to dance with time, unafraid of stepping on memories? That night at home, she picked out a simple wine-colored dress. She didn't know why, but she wanted to be ready. Even if the chair beside her stayed empty. Over the following days, she didn't bring up the subject again. She cared for him with the same attention as always, adjusting his sheets, preparing his tea, bringing his pills with steady hands. Walter didn't say anything either, but something in his gaze seemed less opaque, as if the silence was thinking, as if the shadows were hesitating. On Friday, Olivia noticed that he had shaved. A small detail, a huge sign. On Saturday, just before the dance began, she approached his room again. The door was closed. She knocked twice. "There will be music today," she said softly. "But what matters most is that you know you're welcome." There was no response, no movement. Olivia smiled sadly and walked to the ballroom, where the first residents began to arrive, arm in arm, with old perfumes and dresses kept for decades for special moments like this. As the orchestra began to play a classic instrumental piece, Olivia looked at the door of the ballroom with a lump in her throat. Walter was still in his room, but something inside her told her that maybe he was listening. And sometimes, just knowing that there is still music in the world is the beginning of a return. The music flowed like an old memory through the polished wooden ballroom. The elderly danced delicately, holding on to the memory of bodies that once felt light. Soft lights hung from the ceiling, and the heavy curtains swayed gently with the night breeze. Olivia moved among the tables with grace, adjusting a necklace here, complimenting a suit there. But inside, the question wouldn't quiet. Will he come? Since the beginning of the dance, she had been discreetly glancing at the entrance as if waiting for something she wasn't sure if she wanted or feared. Then the door creaked open with a subtle sound. At first, no one noticed, but Olivia froze. There he was, Walter Green, standing in the doorway, wearing the same gray sweater as always, but with polished shoes, his hair combed, his eyes lowered, as if the very light of the ballroom was too much for someone who had long since grown accustomed to the shadows. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He simply walked slowly to a chair in the corner of the room and sat down without looking at anyone. Silence fell for a moment. Some glances met. An aide murmured, "My God, he came." But Walter seemed oblivious to the commotion. He didn't dance. He didn't talk. He only observed. His hands on his knees, his chin slightly tilted, the posture of someone physically present, but still absent inside. Olivia didn't approach. She kept her distance. She understood that some returns aren't meant to be celebrated with embraces, but with respect. With each new song, Walter blinked slowly. His eyes seemed to scan the faces, the sounds, the memories, as if each chord cut through him like a knife in no hurry. At one of the nearby tables, a lady recognized him. "That was the man from the piano, wasn't it?" she whispered to another resident. "I think so. The one who lost his wife." The words floated through the air like old dust being blown away, but Walter didn't react. Or maybe he did. Inside, the night passed with a soft rhythm. Between boleros and forgotten waltzes, the dance continued as always, with smiles, stumbles, and symbolic toasts. But for Olivia, nothing was the same. She cast occasional glances at Walter, silently hoping. Not for a dance, not for a sudden change, just for his presence. Because being there was already a miracle. The kind of miracle that doesn't come with applause, but with a lump in the throat and a silent, "Thank you." And when the last song ended and the lights began to dim, Walter was still sitting, motionless. But his eyes were filled with tears. And that was more than any waltz could ever reach. The ballroom still exhaled the scent of the previous night. There were deflated balloons, forgotten cups, and chairs out of place. But what truly remained couldn't be captured in a photograph. It was Walter's silence, his motionless presence, and the strange shine in his eyes. Olivia arrived early that Sunday morning. She had slept little, her heart still reverberating with a feeling too hard to name. She walked into the empty ballroom, touched the top of the piano covered with an embroidered cloth, and whispered, "If you ever want to, it's here." The next morning, everything went on as usual, or almost. Walter was in the cafeteria ahead of schedule. He sat without complaining about the food, drank his coffee down to the last drop. When Olivia passed, he whispered, "The music yesterday was bearable." And that, coming from him, was almost a poem. In the afternoon, she left a discreet note on his tray with a single question. "Do you still remember the notes?" There was no immediate response. But by the end of the day, Walter wasn't in his room at the usual time. He was in the ballroom, sitting at the piano. The room was empty, but Olivia watched from the door, in complete silence. Walter ran his fingers over the keys, without pressing them. They seemed like petals in his hands. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and played. The melody began shaky at first. Then it began to solidify. It was a soft, sad song, full of longing. When the music ended, he murmured, "That was her favorite." Olivia didn't move. She just let that moment unfold. The next day, the nursing home organized a small impromptu recital. An electronic keyboard was brought into the ballroom. Some residents sat down curious. Walter hesitated, but when Olivia asked in the softest voice, "Would you like to sing for us?" he simply nodded. He walked slowly to the keyboard. Silence. He looked at the keys, then up at the ceiling as if asking permission from the past. Then he sang. His voice, hoarse and low, rasped like sandpaper. But it was beautiful, deeply beautiful, and full of pain. The lyrics were about absence, about loving someone who's gone, about surviving one's own heart. When he finished, no one clapped right away, because no one could breathe. Walter cried. His shoulders trembled. But he didn't hide. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to be seen, whole, broken, human. Olivia walked to him and held his hand. No words, just presence. And it was there, between worn keys and teary eyes, that Walter's soul sang what his mouth had silenced for years. Because there are pains that are not healed by time, but by the courage to touch even when you tremble. In the days following the recital, something changed in the air at Serenity Meadows. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, like the smell of bread baking or the sound of a distant radio on a late afternoon. But those who paid attention felt it. Walter began having coffee outside his room. He sat with other residents. He responded with nods. Sometimes he even laughed. Quiet, hoarse, but he laughed. And for those who knew him before, this was almost unbelievable. For Olivia, it was simply the silent miracle of a heart that had decided to breathe differently. On a sunny morning, Olivia found Walter in the garden, reading a hardcover book. Upon seeing her, he lifted his eyes and said, "This place isn't as unbearable as I thought it would be." She smiled sweetly. "Maybe because you allowed it to stop being a prison." Walter slowly closed the book. "Or maybe because someone had the courage to wait for me." That hung in the air like a prayer, not spoken, but heard. The news spread. Walter would now give small performances on weekends. Simple things. Old songs, told through stories and memories. The residents began to look forward to it, and those who had once mocked Olivia now sought her advice. Some colleagues apologized, not with words, but with gestures. One brought coffee, another helped with a shift change, And this was how the nursing home, once heavy with routine and apathy, became a home for subtle reunions and hidden healing. One evening, Walter called Olivia to his room. He was sitting at the desk with a sheet of music open and an old photo in hand. "This was the last song I wrote before the fire." Olivia approached carefully. The lyrics spoke of new beginnings, of playing for those who had left, of being a bridge where there were ruins. He handed the sheet to Olivia. "It's yours now. I wouldn't have come back without you." And she, with teary eyes, simply said, "I wasn't the one who brought you back. It was the music that was still there, waiting to be played." In the following weeks, Olivia continued doing what she always did: simple care, genuine smiles, silent listening. But now her steps were lighter. She knew she had planted something that had bloomed. Walter, in turn, began greeting her by name, sitting nearby, playing for others, and for himself. The pain remained. But now it was a bridge, not a prison. And so, in the heart of an ordinary nursing home, two lives crossed paths without promises, without noise, only with presence. And they proved that sometimes the miracle isn't erasing the past. It's having the courage to sing, even with a trembling voice. Olivia never wanted to be a hero. She just wanted to do what was right, even when no one was watching. She didn't enter that nursing home to change anyone. She entered to care. But in the end, she ended up healing something that had been buried for decades. And it wasn't with speeches, promises, or loud miracles. It was with presence, with silence, with persistence. Walter didn't become a different person overnight, but he allowed himself to breathe. He let the pain flow through his voice. And he discovered that he could still be whole, even while carrying pieces. He didn't forget what he lost, but he rediscovered what he could still offer. And that's what transformed him. Not because someone forced him to change, but because someone decided not to leave. This story is about what happens when you choose to see the invisible, when you insist, even when everything tells you to give up. Olivia didn't win with force. She won with compassion. And she reminded everyone there that true faith doesn't need to explain itself. It simply stays, even in the face of disdain. Now, I ask you, how many times have you passed by someone who seemed unreachable? How many stories like this are hidden behind closed doors waiting for just a patient gaze? Maybe you are someone's Olivia, or maybe you're waiting for someone to be yours. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel, hit the bell icon, and share it with someone who needs to hear this.